My daughter Pia, at 6 years old, is outraged. And she says to me, "Mommy, that woman would never have spoken to you that way." At 10 or 11, my son Sam is wary. And he says to me, "Mom, my teacher said yes, but everything about her was a no." So both of them are picking up on all of this information that's being communicated other than the words people use. But what are they going to do about it? There's such a big power differential between children and adults. So Sam knew that his teacher didn't mean what she said. And Pia knew that this woman didn't afford children the same amount of respect as she did adults. But this kind of lying and discrimination is so prevalent. Imagine Sam saying to his teacher, "You know, your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language are all a no. I'm wondering why you're lying to me. Would you tell me why you're lying to me?" And what would have happened if Pia had said to this woman, "You know, I feel like you're discriminating against me because I'm a child. Do you do this to all children? Are there other people you discriminate against?" Well, I think we all know what would have happened. They would have been considered bad kids. They would have been said that they were disrespectful, insubordinate, talking back, defiant, rude, bad kids. They would have been bad kids for telling the truth, because children aren't allowed to tell the truth. They're to be seen and not heard. If children perceive an inconsistency or a prejudice, the last thing they're allowed to do is talk about it out loud with this adult that has all this power over them. They're supposed to just pretend and act like the surface is the reality. Rarely is the surface the reality. So when parents come to me and they say, "My son or daughter is lying to me," I say to them, "Have you created an atmosphere in which your children feel like they can tell you the truth? Is it safe for them to tell you the truth?" Problem children are the ones that speak up. The most famous problem child in the world right now is Greta Thunberg. Have you guys heard of Greta Thunberg? Yeah. So this 16-year-old Swedish girl has taken a stand for climate change. She just spoke at the United Nations in September, and her speaking up has actually triggered some of the most powerful people in the world. Trump is actually tweeting about Greta Thunberg and saying malicious things. It's quite extraordinary when you have a younger person who's found their inner voice and speaks up. It can have a tremendous impact on society. Dr. Louise Porter, in her book, Children Are People Too, she talks about this negative view of children. And she said that there's language that reveals that we have a bias. It's language that says things like this: children are attention-seeking. Children are manipulative. Children misbehave deliberately to get at you. Children have got to learn. Learning self-discipline. And what is so funny about this is that this is actually the technique that we use, this external form of discipline, thinking that it's actually going to teach someone internal self-control. It'll never happen. So if you don't come down hard on children's behaviors, they're going to just keep on happening. Give children an inch, they'll take a mile. If we give in to children, they'll have won and we'll have lost. Spare the rod and spoil the child. So usually we say these things and people kind of nod along and go, "Yep, mm-hmm." But it's as though children are on the march and out to get us. If I turn this into racism and I say Greeks are attention-seeking, whites are manipulative, Asians misbehave deliberately to get at you, New Zealanders have got to learn. If you don't come down hard on Italians, they'll keep misbehaving. Give Aborigines an inch, they'll take a mile. If we give in to Russians, they'll have won and we'll have lost. Spare the rod and spoil the elderly. We laugh because it's clearly racism. And if we substitute children, it's clearly ageism. So what's a child to do? Do I pretend and not speak up? Or do I speak up and risk getting in trouble? Malala, at 12 years old, decided to speak up. And here's the egregious thing that she said: I want an education. And what did the powers that be do? They shot her in the head. It's a miracle that she survived. And she went on to become the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner in history. We acknowledge that it takes courage for kids to speak up. My son, when he was like 6 years old, was invited to join an ice hockey team with his best friend, and he thought that would be really fun. And the difference between the two boys was that his best friend's dad had grown up in the Northeast, and ice hockey was a really big deal in their family, and they were super invested in everybody being really good at it. My husband is from Palm Springs, and I don't even think the words ice hockey had been spoken in our house until that day. We were completely uninvested in whether Sam was good at ice hockey. So what do you think happened when Sam turned out to be the better player? His little buddy was saying things like, "You're not that hot. See, you missed the goal. You think you're so good." And Sam's looking at me like, "Mom," and he couldn't understand it. But we were really good friends with the family. So we all sat down together to figure out what was going on. And it turned out that his little friend actually thought that if he wasn't the best at ice hockey, his dad wouldn't love him. Now, that probably sounds ridiculous, that any little child would think that his father's love was based on performance, but nevertheless, it was real for him. And he was so scared, and he didn't know how to handle it, so he took it out by bullying his best friend. So, what do? Do we give this little boy the skills he needs to navigate these scary feelings inside? Or do we punish him for being badly behaved? That's usually exactly what we do, is we punish the bad behavior, and it's called an external locus of causality. So if we believe that it's the use of rewards and punishments that you use to get people to change their behavior, then we're said to have an external locus of causality. It's as though we believe outside events actually determine our well-being. It's a little bit like this: the fantasy of an adult, that you can actually just press a button and get someone to change their behavior. Dr. Thomas Gordon, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times, in his research, he found that if you use a controlling form of discipline, what you actually ignite is retaliation, rebellion, and resentment. It's called the 3 R's. And Dr. Louise Porter, in her research, determined that 75% of our problems are a result of a controlling form of discipline igniting the 3 R's. So we're clear. You have a problem. A little boy is being unsportsmanlike. This example is really good. Let's pretend that we're looking at the surface behavior, which is unsportsmanlike behavior. If we just work with that, punishing it, doing whatever we can to get this person to change their behavior, we might be able to get them to change their behavior, but not for the reasons that we wanted. They'd probably do it because they were afraid of what was going to happen to them. What we want to do is get them to be able to regulate their emotions. So we have to address the underlying unmet needs. If we have an internal locus of causality, what we're doing is not punishing the surface behaviors, but we're addressing the underlying unmet needs. If we do that, it's actually called an internal locus. If we use an internal locus, we recognize that it's not about the reflection in the mirror. So if I'm looking in the mirror at a reflection, I can't manipulate or change it by changing or wiping the mirror. If I have lint on my shoulder and I see it in the mirror, I do this, and it disappears there. And this is our understanding of what an internal locus of causality looks like. Steve Jobs said, "Intuition is the natural ability to perceive beyond our senses. Following our inner guide is tapping into higher intelligence that helps one to navigate through life, not necessarily to succeed, but to travel uncertainty of life with greater confidence." And that's what we're teaching people to get in tune with their inner voice. My daughter, at about 6 years old, she was a part of a brownie troop. In Hong Kong, it's hard to find places where you can go horseback riding and bicycling and trails, but the troop was going to go to this really special place, and all the moms were invited too. And so I'm running late that day because I had a class to teach, and as I'm approaching, I get a telephone call from my daughter who says, "Mom, where are you?" And I said, "I'm almost there. I just want to go, I just want to go, I just want to go." I was like, wow. I drive up, I find her brownie leader, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Pia hit somebody at dinner. So she's got to learn a lesson. I've sent her to her room as a punishment. She's there alone now." Oh my gosh, well, what happened? Why did she hit somebody? I don't know, but hitting is unacceptable. So I went into the room and I said, "Sweet pea, what's going on?" And she says, "I just want to go, I just want to go, I just want to go." And I said, "I'll take you, but not until we clear your good name. I don't want you getting a negative reputation. You're seen as the bad girl right now. But I know you didn't just hit somebody for no good reason. What happened?" "Well, Mom, I was at dinner and this girl just kept calling me names, Pia pee-pee head, Pia poo-poo head. And she was doing it over and over, and I was so embarrassed and humiliated, and I asked her, please stop, and she wouldn't, so I finally just said, stop it. And then I'm the one who got in trouble." Oh, sweetie. And I held her and I said, "I am so sorry. That is so unjust." And I went out and I told her brownie leader what had happened. And she looked at me and said, "I am so sorry, Katherine. I had no idea that she was being bullied." And I said, "Exactly, because it's like two ships passing in the night. If you don't understand the dynamics, to just punish the surface behavior without understanding all of the underlying unmet needs, it's literally creating harm." So what are we creating? The person drowning is still hurting, and in this case, they're in their room alone. It reinforces that you have to be perfect all the time, and the person drowning doesn't get the support that they need. It also activates the 3 R's: retaliation, rebellion, resentment, plus fight, flight, submit. So in Pia's case, all she wanted to do was flee, but she was also resentful. And it could have activated some of the other R's. She could have trashed the room, knocked over a lamp, broken a window, trashed the bathroom, written on the walls. And all of those secondary behaviors would have been a result of how the initial problem had been handled. Autonomous children as well are so misunderstood. A child with autonomy needs is perceived as being disobedient and disrespectful. And so it truly is adults, because they don't understand that this is a need that's just a need for self-direction. They don't know how to resolve conflicts. And so these situations also trigger the 3 R's. And if you have a child with the disposition of a car alarm, and I had a child with the disposition of a car alarm, there is no amount of rewards or punishments that's going to change the behavior. It is an irritation in the central nervous system, and unless you address that irritation, you're not going to be able to change the surface behaviors. So, anyone whose side is not understood or acknowledged feels misunderstood, marginalized, dismissed, invisible, and this inner state is revealed in more and more tragic expressions as the unmet needs increase. I would venture to say that this interaction manifests ultimately as bigger and bigger expressions of the 3 R's. Small acts of rebellion can become large protests up to and including mass shootings and suicide. This is the conversation that we're not having. Yet this is the conversation that we have to have. To what extent is authoritarian discipline that focuses on the presenting problems and incites the 3 R's, retaliation, rebellion, and resentment, fueling our sense of isolation, disconnection, violence, and the mental health crisis in this country? We no longer have the luxury of ignoring the necessity to address the underlying unmet needs. Knowing that this will resolve the surface behavior, all we have to do is suspend our judgment of what people who are drowning look like and how we feel about it, and teach them how to swim. Teaching an internal locus of causality isn't optional, it's imperative. And we don't have the illusion any longer of pretending that we're not the ones who are seeding the harvest that we're reaping, because we are. On May 17th, at Parkrose High School in Portland, Oregon, I felt that this was one of the most inspiring moments in American history. This coach actually disarmed this student, and he said, I looked in his eyes and I felt compassion for him. I held him in my arms and he broke down and cried. And I told him, I'm here for you. He actually said, I'm here to save you, and your life is worth living. And what was so beautiful is in October, just last month, at his sentencing hearing, the judge said, what you need is support. And what is his sentence? To get the kind of support that he needs to address his underlying unmet needs. And to me, this is so beautiful. So what we must recognize is that children need our compassion the most when they appear to deserve it the least. What would have happened if I hadn't been there for Pia? What would have happened if the ice hockey family hadn't been there for their little boy? And what would have happened if this coach hadn't been there for that student? There could have been tragic outcomes. I don't want us to just grieve for the children whose sides are not heard, understood. I want us to do the hard work of understanding each other. There's no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame. We just have to recognize that we have to pivot. Authoritarian discipline, which uses rewards and punishments to force obedience and compliance, is toxic, dysfunctional, and dangerous. From now on, we need to listen to each other's voice. From now on, we need to honor each other's perspectives. From now on, everybody matters. From now on, children are people too, right? So we have to recognize that what's required is a shift in perspective. How we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, how we interact with one another in society. Let's make it more authentic, truthful, peaceful, and loving.